Check. Okay. So if you are in Lightroom and you want to actually work with this file in Photoshop, I'm going to go into the Develop module, and let's say we can do a couple things here in the Develop module just to sort of change things around a little bit. So for instance, I can set the white balance of this. And let's say I want to bring the exposure down, and I'm just throwing in a couple of settings so that you can sort of see that this stuff gets transferred into Photoshop. So typically the way most people would bring this file into Photoshop is they would come up to Photo and they would come down to Edit In and then Edit in Photoshop. And when that happens, what it does is it takes all the settings that you've got right here and it bakes that into a Photoshop file. And so once it's inside of Photoshop, it's either a Photoshop or a TIFF file at that stage of the game, but you lose all of the raw file quality of it, or not quality, you lose the raw file capabilities of this, and these settings are applied, but then there's no way to change them if you decide you want to go in and modify this. So instead, you come up to Photo, you come down to Edit In, and you come down to Open as Smart Object in Photoshop. And when that happens, this is actually going to, if I have Photoshop open, if you don't have it open, it'll launch Photoshop. This is actually going to take me into Photoshop. I said this is going to take me into Photoshop, and here into Photoshop you can see the image, and by and large it looks like a baked file, except when you look at the layer right here you can actually see there's a little icon in the lower right hand corner here, and that indicates that this is a smart object. And what a smart object basically is a container, and that container is holding my raw data. So if you double click on this, it brings me into Camera Raw, and all of my settings are right here in Camera Raw. That -1.2 in my exposure is sitting right here, so I could zero that back out. If I wanted to pick a different white point here, I could pick a different white point here, like going off that back wall or off of that G right there. So again, this allows me to reprocess my raw data over and over and over. Does that make sense? Nice trick, right? Okay, here's the one that you need to know. And then we're going to move on because other people in here could care less about this. But nonetheless, if I actually copy this the way you would typically copy a file, it looks like we've got two copies of this. In reality, these are really a clone of the same thing. Both of these are referring to that same single set of raw data. So if I open up one of them by simply double-clicking on it, I go into Camera Raw, and I'm going to drop my exposure down so you can see that I've got a big change here. And when you do that, you'll notice that the exact same thing happens to the file that's right above it. So these now are identical. They're really clones of each other because they're referring to the exact same data set for each other. But if I go back in time to when things just got opened, so I've just got this one smart object here. Instead, if you make a smart object in a different way, which is what I'm going to do, I'm going to come up to the Layer menu, down to Smart Objects, and do New Smart Object via Copy. I now have two distinctly different copies of raw data, and I can process them in any way that I want. So if I double-click this one, I can say zero it out so that it's a normal exposure. Fine. And you'll see that it's completely different than the raw data that's underneath it. The raw data that's underneath it, if I open it up, it's got the original raw settings in it. And you can do this over and over and over again. So I can have 500 copies of my raw data all processed differently with all of those processings saved in this file. You cannot do that in Lightroom. In Lightroom, if you make a change to anything, it overwrites the previous metadata. You only can have one version.
But even with the virtual copy?
Doesn't matter.
That's something that puts me up.
Yeah.
Because you want to save one version.
So this, I can actually throw a layer mask on this guy, which is how we all work. And then if I want, let's say, the face to be brighter, I'm just going to hit a B key, make it a little bit larger, make sure I'm painting with white. All my blending modes are normal, normal, normal. Medium hardness on my brush. I simply come in here to this, gonna paint in his face. This is how I dodge and burn everything, by reprocessing raw data. I don't dodge and burn with a curve ever again. Because if you're doing it with a curve, once this is rendered in Photoshop, if you do this work with a curve, you are doing it on a baked file, you're not doing it on raw data, and you lose all the impact of what raw data can really afford you. So, anyway, Make sense? Okay, any word back from them yet, Robert?
You can go forward.
Okay, let's go forward. So the big question and the one that we need to get to, let me actually load up or connect my hard drive. You guys all need to get rid of your OneDrive now, because your OneDrive is connected to these computers. So we need to go through that so that that is no longer the case. All right? Okay, so in order to do that, come in. If you don't have OneDrive, if it's not active and working for you right now, you should still have it active on these machines. But if you don't, simply navigate to your application folder and down to OneDrive, and you need to launch OneDrive. And then it should show up here, sitting up here at the top. And click on the little icon that's at the top. And in the little icon that's up at the top, it says, okay, everything's set, everything's good to go, we're fine to go here. Click on your More drop-down menu, and we need to actually pause the syncing of this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pause mine for, let's say, 2 hours. We can actually start it up again right now. But right now it's saying they're currently not being synced. So there's a problem with that, which is fine for me. And then I'm going to navigate to wherever my OneDrive is. In the case of you guys, again, if you come over here to wherever this folder is, the one that you actually set up here in the very beginning, we need to find that. And you can see in my case, mine, I'm looking at my tree right down here. It's telling me that it's in my OneDrive. In the case of you all, what you would look for on the side over here is you want to find the your computer number. So in the case of this would be the 917. You need to get to your home folder. So I'm going to wait to make sure that everybody can find their home folder. Bless you. So in my case, it's the thing that looks like the little house. So is everybody able to find theirs? No? Yeah, well, it's not going to work if we don't find them. So yeah, you clicked on that part, so we need to find users. And then click on this, add guest, and this is your folder right there. So that is your folder. Anybody else need help? Okay. Yeah, so this shows us where we are right now, but we need to actually get to this guy by itself. So come down to, as soon as we're really quick, come up to Finder, up here. That's okay, down to Preferences. And click on Hard Drives, show Hard Drives. That's good. And then come back over here to this side and get that out of the way. And then you're going to double click on that number. There, and this is going to open up, and that's fine. Come down to users at the bottom, click on users, and then add guest, and that is your OneDrive folder right there. So don't screw with it yet. You got it?
Yeah, add guest.
Got it. Yeah, so we're finding it, but we need to find it locally for you. So come over to your Finder, up down Preferences. And Preferences, that's already on. So then come back into here. Do a quick Finder, hide others. You can close the Preferences up if you want. And then Finder, hide others. That makes sure all that shut. And so then double click on this guy.
Oh yeah, that's it.
And then you go down to users at the bottom. Users. And then click on that. And that is the drive we're looking for right there. That's a folder, but don't do anything to it yet. Is everybody else good? You're good? Okay. So you need to pitch this folder. You need to actually drag the entire thing to the trash, and you need to go ahead and empty the trash. And it's going to cause a problem, but that's a good problem to actually have. So I'm going to come up here and click on this guy. Because you want to throw the whole thing. You don't want to just throw the library, whatever. You want to throw the whole thing. That whole folder is going away. So it's just Command Delete to actually get rid of it. And then again, I'm going to come up to the Finder menu, and I'm going to come down to Empty Trash, and I'm going to go ahead and say Empty the Trash. And then I'm going to come over to my OneDrive folder right here, to again that little icon that's sitting up at the very top. And I'm going to click on the More, and I'm actually going to Resume Syncing. And you're going to get this warning that comes up, and it's this thing that right here. It says, we couldn't find that guy. And so for you to go back now to doing your sync the way it used to be, Tom, in your case, because you've already got this going on your computer back at the studio, you would simply connect to that computer and either click try again, and if it finds it, it sees it. Otherwise, you click on set up OneDrive, and it walks you through all of those steps again. Make sense? But all of this information is contained for you, again, in this PDF. So again, for me, I'm going to actually quit out of this. So I'm going to go, I can say set up my OneDrive again. However, I'm not going to sign in. I'm going to quit the application if it lets me. So I'm just going to close up that window. And my application has actually quit now, I'm fairly certain. So you won't get that warning again until you actually launch OneDrive again. So if you don't have OneDrive on your personal computer, go ahead and download it if that's the one you want it to sync to. Just go ahead and download it, and then just follow the exact same steps we did through the PDF about how to set that up. So again, I'm going to show that to you really quick.
Did you actually throw away all of the information in your OneDrive when you threw it in the trash?
I did throw it all away, what was in there, but there was nothing in there except an empty catalog.
But even if somebody could have stuff backed up for weeks, that's how you do it.
No, and again, that's why we talk about this in here. So again, you guys simply go through the same process again. Load OneDrive onto your hard drive, log in with your information, do the whole 9 yards right here. When you get to this thing that's saying this is your OneDrive folder, you can click change location and go to the OneDrive that would be on your personal computer or whatever other laptop part that you've actually got, and then continue through on like this to actually sync your files. Does that make sense? Right now, we don't have anything to sync to. So, but to your point is the warning that I give everybody down here. When you're going through all of this, you need to changing your local drive. You need to do this whole warning part right here. This part actually matters. So to make sure that there's something else not going on here, I want to try one other thing really quick. We've all quit OneDrive right now because we actually got rid of the drive that it's actually loading. If you will, go ahead and go back to applications one more time. Let's launch OneDrive one more time. You're going to get it's going to ask you to do the whole sign-in part right here. So I am going to, no, I'm not going to do this right now. Again, you want to go through this step, so let's just not do this right now. Simply go through those steps and you should be good to go.
So, Versa,
Yeah.
you know how you can go directly online?
Yes.
So I'm looking at mine and I refreshed it and I'm still seeing my information in there.
That's because the information is still on your OneDrive because we haven't synced again when we threw away the version that you had on this right here. There's nothing left to sync to, so it's not seeing an empty space. There's nothing left to sync to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, but it will stay there forever. That's actually the idea. So that's why it functions as a backup, because if you were to lose it, if you were to lose your hard drive, somebody stole your hard drive or it failed, whatever, you've still got that. And then you would just build a new hard drive and do what you're going to ultimately do, reset it up to sync to that hard drive, and you should be good to go.
Cursor, when it said it couldn't link to it,
Yes.
I hit try again.
Yes.
After I threw it away, it
Yes.
popped up again.
Did it bring it up again? Did it make another folder for that same thing? So it just rebuilt the folder?
Do I remove OneDrive from the application?
I'm sorry?
Do I remove OneDrive from the application?
Oh, good luck. Don't bother. Because it's just the application. It doesn't have any of your data in it.
Oh, okay.
It's just the application.
So right now, I threw it away.
Yeah.
The file went away.
All right.
And if I go back to the applications, like now, go back there, and I click on it.
Okay, good.
And it says, you can do it. If I try again.
You can go ahead and click on OneDrive and see what it's saying, see if you get any of the warning part coming up. OneDrive is updating your files to Columbia, Chicago. This stage of the game, when I were here, is click on this because that should exist. That looks like it's bringing all that back. So that's the guy you threw away.
Yeah.
Me too.
All of you guys, right? Okay, then do me a favor. Go ahead and let it resync. So in your case, go back up to here. We're going to go after this another way. Go ahead and click on more and go ahead and resume syncing. So go ahead and let this completely resume syncing, guys. Yeah, don't worry about it. We're going to look at other stuff while it's syncing. So it's simply downloading stuff. We're going to actually go after this another way to make sure. So we might as well do this with everybody. I knew I should have just looked at the PDF and done it the way it said to do it in the PDF. So I'm going to double click on my hard drive, on my OneDrive. I'm going to log into my address. I'm going to add my, there's a problem.
See, now I get the green check mark.
Yeah, me too.
Of course you do. Okay, and I'm going to just put mine in my user folder so that mine looks exactly like yours does. I'm not going to put it back on my external hard drive, so I'm simply going to hit next, and I'll say use this location, and it's going to offer me to sync all of this thing, and I'm going to say fine, go ahead and do next, and then I can open this on my Columbia folder, whatever, and see, and it's bringing back. So the stuff that had been loaded up there, this is exactly what you would hope to have happen. This is what you would want to have happen. I was just hoping that it would allow us to go in and change its location and set it up there, but it's going to force us to go through another hoop. So if we go back and look at the PDF for this, I'm going to go up to the top, and this is how you would actually change your locations for this. So the whole first part of this is about how you actually set it up initially, but then as you get down to...
Sir, I was able to bring back my files, but my OneDrive is saying it isn't connected. No, right.
Of course it is. We're not connected, but here are all your files.
Yeah.
All right, so this is your local, this is your online guy right here. So come back down here. It says you're signing out. Yeah, I don't get that either. So, no, don't close anything. You can try to quit OneDrive and we'll just launch it again. This will still stay up. So go ahead and quit OneDrive, and then launch it again from down here. And then go ahead and do your login. It's asking you to set it up again, but it already exists, so we'll see what it says. And then go behind it and type in your password. And then we're going to set another. So this is actually saying to put it into this same. So it's just going to put it right back where it was. And just go ahead and say next. And then go ahead and say yes. It's going to sync all those guys. And then just open it up on your local. And that's where it is. So it's just brought those guys back. But we're going to try another way of going about doing this.
Check mark too.
Yeah, I know. So see? So at any rate, guys, so if you take a look at the PDF that I've got about all of OneDrive on a Macintosh, on page 7 starts the change OneDrive location on your Macintosh. So this is how we're going to go about doing it this time. So basically it involves disengaging the computer that you've got right now. So we're simply going to follow the steps right here. So you click on your OneDrive to this little guy right here, the cloud part, and you come down to More. And inside of More, let me move this guy a little bit to the side. Come up to Preferences. And Preferences will actually open up. I'm going to go back and say, okay, so this is showing you Preferences right here. Click on More, go to Preferences. Then you need to go to the Account tab that is in your Preferences. So again, oh, come on. go to the account tab, and then you see this thing that says unlink this Mac. You need to unlink your Mac. And it's going to say, unlinking this account, you are going to stop syncing and a copy of these files will be left on the Mac. That's fine. We're going to throw them away as soon as we do this. So go ahead and say unlink your Mac, and then this is going to offer, again, you to set up to send it all to another place. So again, so we've gone through this part here. So the account tab. So again, check on unlink this Mac. In the dialog that opens, go ahead and say you want to unlink the account. The following dialog will open, and again, you're simply going to re-log in again. But at this stage of the game, we can stop, and hopefully when we try this, this will actually end that behavior. Your files will still be up on your cloud version, but they won't be on this guy any longer. So again, you would simply, when the time comes, launch OneDrive again and go through this. But if I go back to OneDrive right now, at this stage of the game, I'm going to quit this. I'm simply going to close it. You'll notice that again, OneDrive has stopped working now. I mean, it's actually shut down, which is fine. And now go to your, again, for those of you on all these computers here, you need to go find your user folder, the one that's got the little house on it. So again, go to your boot drive, the one that's got the number on it. Go to users at the bottom. Inside the user folder, you will find the little home folder, and inside that little home folder, you should see this OneDrive right here, and you throw that whole thing out, and you are good to go. So, did everybody find that? No, if you didn't find it, please tell me.
And then what would be the app? Why would we do this?
Because right now, these guys are syncing all of their personal files to these computers right here. And they don't want them on these.
But is it literally, you know how when we sign in, we have our own desktop?
You do.
Is it literally our desktop, or is it like the physical computer?
That's actually a Gia question, and I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, just conceptually.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. Robert, would you have any idea about that?
I think it's based on your login.
Right.
You're like, I'm on the add guest.
Right.
So the person that sits here and types in add guest.
Right.
Is going to be able to click on that folder.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you no longer, when you sign in, so I guess when John signed all these computers in, he didn't sign them in with your personal info, right? So I think what she's asking is that if he had signed you in with your personal info, you would have gone to your personal space on this, wouldn't you? No?
Because they're not active accounts anymore.
Okay, so no is the answer to that.
When you log in, it's local. You're logging into basically an account. All the stuff that you're saving is onto a local computer.
Right.
Unlike before, where we have active accounts where it's pulling the desktop from a server and then dumping it on. That way, anything you save on that computer, you go to another computer, you could log in and you get the same desktop.
Right.
Got it.
The new version doesn't allow for it. I mean, where we are right now, it doesn't allow for it. We got rid of Active Directory. like
For
a year ago.
faculty too?
Yes, a year ago.
Oh, but then isn't there something that pops up? There was some folder of storage?
Yeah, it's.
That's gone too.
The class project.
Yeah, class projects, all that. They're replacing it. I don't want, I'm sorry.
Okay.
They're not, it's not, they're replacing it. So, but the long and the short of it is you want to keep this, it's your personal stuff. You want to keep it on either your personal computer or your personal hard drive. You don't want to store it on this stuff, I wouldn't think.
But the students can choose to just be backing up their Lightroom library and that.
The way this is set up, it's designed to automatically back up their Lightroom library and all their raw files to the cloud. That's the whole purpose of what we're doing with OneDrive. Okay. Okay. So that gets us through printing. That gets us through formatting hard drives. That gets us through the OneDrive setup. That gets us through lunch. Thank you again, Robert. Lightroom. All right, so let's talk about Lightroom really quickly. Again, I'm going to open up this PDF to go through it. I'm going to get rid of that guy and this guy, and we're going to start right here. So this is going to go hopefully faster than not because so many of you guys are already familiar with Lightroom. So I'm just going to, no, that's a little small. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to go through this, and what I'd like everybody to do is just please, please, please. I want to try to get through this as I want to get through this as fast as possible, but I don't want to skip anything. I don't want to gloss over anything. So, if there's something you don't understand, please stop me. If there's a place where you get lost, please stop me. Just say, hey, no, wait, verse or no, stop, whatever. Hopefully it'll be pretty straightforward, but I just want to sort of make sure that it is. So to start this whole process, I'm probably going to have to give you guys another set of files. And so let's do this. Let me start this first. I'm just going to drag over what I call an imitation SSD, because we need to go through the whole process of importing files. And in order to do that, we need a source of files to actually do that. Do you guys have, with the hard drives that you brought, do you have a couple of raw files on your hard drive? I don't need more than one or two. Do you guys have that, or should we pass that around? Yeah, okay, no, we're passing it around then. It's not that big of a deal. It's actually relatively simple to do, although I'm going to make this one much smaller. Okay, 4 files will be plenty. All right, I'm going to pass around my external hard drive. Inside of it, you will see, here, let me show you again because I mounted it. You'll actually see this folder right here, Compact Flash Card Imitation Copy. If you can simply copy that to your desktop. There's only 4 files in it, but it'll give us something to work with. And then we're gonna, while you are actually copying this and passing it around, so it just plugs into the very back of your computer and simply drag them onto your desktop and the other side, and you should be good to go. And then as soon as your copy happens, because it should be almost immediate, just eject the hard drive and drag it to, and hand it to the next person. Yeah, so just drag that out of your desktop. Okay, we're good to go. So if you guys could pass that around, that'd be great. While it's getting passed around, we're going to actually start the whole Lightroom part. So again, if you look in that whole list of PDFs that I sent to you guys, there is one that's called Lightroom Workflow, and this is pretty, again, this is one that I put together with Christian Erberger last year. It's updated. It's less than a year old, and nothing has fundamentally changed in Lightroom that I have been able to detect, so this should be still viable. So to just give you a quick idea of the tour part through this, one of the things that worried Chris and I when we first set this up was that people had to wade through, well, you can see this is 43 pages long. Don't worry, a lot of pictures in here. But we were worried that people, all they wanted to do was import some files, and they had to wade through 20 pages of some PDF in order to figure out how to import a file. And that became frustrating to them, and we didn't want that part to happen. So for students, once they have got their Lightroom catalog set up and everything is good to go, if they struggle, if they cannot remember how to import files, there is the very first page, and it's only a page long. Page number 1 will show them everything that they need to do. When it comes time for us to actually do the import, we will actually just follow this recipe right here, and you'll sort of see how that whole part works. You don't think you have that? You don't have that. You don't have those files.
Oh, but I already did this whole thing.
Oh yeah, so if you don't want to go through that part, that's fine. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
It's very
That's fine. We did all of this, and you're exactly right. Yep. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. So page number 2 is how to export images from Lightroom. Those are the 2 really essential things that need to be done, is importing and exporting. So that's basically what these do, and it's just 2 pages. That's all they have to go through. So once it's all set up, as long as they don't screw with it and just continue to work with it the way you've taught them to work with it, everything will function fine. They'll have a backup in the cloud. Everything should be fine. Now, we all know that that's not going to happen, but you can always hope for the best. All right, so at any rate, that's pretty much what's going on here. So in page 3, it gets into how to format a hard drive. We already went through that this morning. It's all the same thing is going on in here. So in page number 4, it's actually, again, this is all formatting hard drive. You'll see as we go down through here. By the time we get down to page number 6, this is actually, it says right here to go ahead and again, set up your Microsoft OneDrive first, because we want them to put this whole folder structure on their local hard drive, their local OneDrive partition. That's where we want them to put all of this stuff. So that's what this whole part here is about. Shoot.
So some students, very few, are only using desktops.
Yes.
Everyone else brings their laptop.
Yes.
So should the student that not have the laptop be setting their drives up on
As an external, they should be doing it on an external hard drive.
external hard?
Exactly. Which is pretty much what I suggest doing anyway, because one of the things that we're running into, the problem that we're running into, is students, when they go to buy a new computer, now all of Apple's computers, especially all the laptops, everything is soldered into place, so you cannot swap out, you can't get a bigger hard drive, you can't change the memory, all of that, and they're all buying 250 gigabyte hard drives, which immediately get worn out. I mean, they're just, it's absurd, but that they buy the smallest because it's the cheapest, but then they run out of room, and 250 gigabytes, I can shoot that in 2 months. I shoot it in a month, actually. So having it on an external is probably good practice for almost everybody because they are running out of space on their local laptops. Does that sort of, yeah. So at any rate, that's what this whole part is about. So we have sort of gone through all of this. We did create the catalog. Again, this gets us through all the creating the whole catalog part. We did that part as well. So this is just walking us through how do you create the new catalog, where you locate it, it's in the catalog. This again is just setting up the catalog part. You can check to make sure that you've got these files in here. As long as you've got these files in here, you're good to go. So blah, 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 blah. So then we get to preferences. So I need everybody to, if they would please, to go ahead and launch Lightroom. So you need to go ahead and open it up. And then I am going to try to work us through everything that we need to do in this guy. So I'm going to open mine up here and try to get sort of a split screen kind of thing going. And I'm going to come up, we need to actually set up preferences here to begin with and have a conversation about those. So to get to preferences in Lightroom, come up to Lightroom Classic, come down to preferences, and a dialog box will open up. And this is what we actually need to walk through, is this stuff right here. So if we take a look, I'm going to let you guys do this. I'm not going to do this on my screen. I'm going to show you the PDF and we'll walk through all the steps. But if you could go ahead and do it, that part would actually be terrific. So let me zoom in here just a little bit more. So on the first thing you want to actually set is on the far left side, go ahead and click on the General tab. You can select your language. This can actually change depending. Then on the settings, show splash screen during startup. If you like that weird little picture of, I don't know, they do different pictures every, that's what that is all about. You can have automatically checked for updates. That always drives me nuts. When starting up, use this catalog. It always is going to default to your most recent catalog. This actually makes sense for it to do. And then down here for the options that we are going to select and not select, show import dialog when a memory card is detected. If you are working in a different program that you prefer to do your importing in, so let's say you're a person who prefers Capture One, or God forbid you're a person who prefers iPhoto or just Apple's Photos, whatever, you might want to uncheck this, but for every other reason you probably want them to actually be importing their stuff into Lightroom. Select current previous import. You don't need to actually, this is all about collections. Ignore camera generated folders. You do want want to ignore that part. There are folders. There are cameras that will actually build folders on your compact disc card. You don't want those folders to be brought in. Treat JPEGs next to RAW. This doesn't really matter to me. You could actually check it. It won't really change a whole lot. Replace embedded previews with the standard previews. You do want to do that. Your camera actually generates a small JPEG for you to look at. In our case, we prefer to have a standard set of previews. And then completion sounds. If you want your computer to make noises when it actually is finished doing something, you can check those. We go to the next screen down, and the next screen down you need to go over to the next of the preferences, which is presets. So again, in the presets, I don't really care about making defaults specific to certain camera settings. These are really relatively advanced. You can actually have you can have Lightroom apply different sort of all sorts of presets of developing presets. You can have it do noise reduction, all this depending on your ISO camera settings. Way too advanced for what we're starting out here. Show partially compatible develop presets. Again, visibility question here. I don't really care about this part either. Store presets with the catalog. This is an important one, and I don't think this one is on by default. Is yours turned on? Was yours checked? No, it's not on by default, and I actually have a big problem with that. So basically what this is saying is that it will take any presets that are made and it will actually put them in your catalog and keep them there. And the advantage of this is that as you move your catalog around, so if your catalog is on an external hard drive and you go to a different computer, your presets are still available to you, as opposed to presets which used to be stored in the system of the computer that you're on. So if it's stored in a system file and you take your hard drive and go to another computer, you don't have the advantage of what was stored on the previous computer. So that's why we actually enable this. The rest of this part you can all leave at its defaults. I'm going to go, and if you want to get deeper into it, guys, there's an explanation over here on the side about everything that's going on in here. So if you're one of those kind of people that really likes to go into the woods, that's great. The next thing is to go to the third tab over, external editing. You have options here for your primary editor, which is the one at the top, and your secondary external editor here at the bottom. And all this is doing is setting up how you actually take files into an external editing program. Now, in this case, most people, really the only one that I know of that people are exporting their files into is into Photoshop. If you were doing this into Bibble or you were doing this into Capture One, you were importing this into someplace else, you might change the way these are, but right now this is going to be set up to actually bring this stuff into Photoshop. So in the primary version of this, and again, some of this has been mitigated by the Smart Object trick that I just showed you guys before. If you are actually bringing your files in as a Smart Object, you're bringing in a copy of your raw data, and none of this really matters because you blow past all this. You're not bringing it in as a TIFF. You're bringing it in actually as a raw file. So this wouldn't matter. But again, I have not been able to convince Photo Practice 1 to embrace smart objects yet. So what is being taught in that level, and probably in Photo Practice 2 as well, is that people are actually doing what most people in this room were doing until today. You're actually going up to Lightroom. So let me just show you really quick. You're coming up to Lightroom. You're going to Photo, Edit in, and this is what we're trying to set up right here, is this Edit in Photoshop. When I showed you Open as Smart Objects in Photoshop, it circumvents all of the need to deal with any of this. But as long as it's being taught that way, we might as well set this up correctly. So the file format in your drop-down menu, you have TIFF, and I think you also have Photoshop PSD as an option. It doesn't really matter. They both do exactly the same thing. Some people claim that the TIFF version is actually a little bit smaller. Yeah, I don't really believe that, but nonetheless, either one of those doesn't matter. The department has settled on Adobe RGB as the default color space. This has more of an implication here where we're processing these files when we bring them in. Again, if you're using Smart Objects, you circumvent that whole thing because you're really bringing in the raw file, the raw data file from your camera, and it actually is sitting in your camera space. So again, this part wouldn't matter right here. And then we're also saying that you should be doing 8-bit depth, because that 8-bit is an adequate bit depth to describe the Adobe Photoshop color space, and it is half the size of a 16-bit file. Resolution here doesn't matter whatsoever. It actually comes in pixel for pixel. It's just a question of what it gets assigned in Photoshop. This doesn't change anything. You could have any number in here. It wouldn't make a bit of difference. And then compression, none. TIFF files can actually have compression on them. There's various versions of compression. Some of the compression is lossy, meaning you lose this data. You wouldn't want to do that. Some of it is lossless. Whatever it does compress the file, it's actually pretty minimal. It probably, what you gain in space, you lose in time. And again, in this day and age, when people have got 4 terabyte hard drives, it doesn't matter. However, there is a second option here, and it's this one right here, is an additional external editor. And it's basically the exact same settings, except it bumps your color space up to ProPhoto RGB, which is a significantly larger color space. And then it also is setting it to 16 bits per component in this. You need that 16-bit to describe the size of a ProPhoto RGB space. Again, resolution is meaningless, and compression, you would want to leave it none. And then stack with original. What this means when you enable this is that when you open a file, when we do that same thing that we just talked about doing, going from Lightroom into Photoshop, if you were to actually bring this into Photoshop, I'll see if this one actually comes in that way. So this is the baked version right now. You can see it's not a smart object. It has had those adjustments applied to it. This is a baked file now. I don't have access to my raw data here in Photoshop any longer. That part's gone. If I simply close this file and save it, then you go back in Lightroom and take a look, you'll actually see down here at the bottom, it's sitting right down here, right next to the one that I just had. You can see I've got a CR2 version of this down here, and I've got a TIFF version of it. This is the baked file right here. And again, you can see I didn't have, when I said save, or just closed it and said save, I didn't have to say put it back in the Lightroom catalog, whatever. All of that was automatic, and that is because of this preference setting right here. This guy right here, stack with original. Then we can do custom settings here for the template, again, because you would want this thing to be renamed. And you'll notice if you look at mine right here, at the TIFF file that I'm actually got selected right here, it's this. I'm going to leave it on here, but you need to look at the naming that's right under here. So I've got to hover over this. You'll see where it actually has the file of the name right here. It's got the name that's set up right here. So this is the name of the file right here. But this underscore edit underscore 03.tiff, that is done via a template that is set up in Photoshop that we will actually talk about in just a second. So, next one down, go over to file handling. So in file handling, when we come across, again, this is for people who are dealing in DNG. We could have many long conversations about DNG, about what it is. Is anybody here really unclear about what DNG is? DNG is Adobe's version of a RAW file, so you can actually convert your CR2 files, which is a Canon RAW file, or your NEF Nikon file, or your what's Sony? Does anybody know? AWR. You're absolutely right. You get the prize. The promise has always been that Adobe's RAW file can take all the raw data that is in any one of those RAW files and bring it into what Adobe considers to be their RAW format, which is DNG, and Adobe promises until the end of time it will support that, and you will always be able to open it and have access to it. There's varying degrees of believability and all of that, and we don't need to go in that. That debate is way too long to go with. So we are simply going to leave the extension as lowercase. That's one of the options that you've got here. All of this can pretty much stay at its default. I don't know if Jpeg Size is at its default, but I know the compatibility probably is. And this is just saying what version of Camera Raw do you want this to be compatible with. So this is 7.1 and later. 7.1 goes back years, so you don't need to worry about compatibility. Jpeg Size here, we would leave at medium. Again, this is the JPEG. This is the preview of your DNG, not the preview that we're going to actually work with in Lightroom. Embed fast load data. I have no idea what that means, but enable it. Then these next things down here, treat metadata. This part becomes really pretty important right here. So, and what this is actually signifying is that there are illegal characters that exist in the world of servers, specifically Unix servers that you might be tempted to upload a file to. In the world of Macintosh, things are relatively, they let you get away with more. You can use illegal characters, but in the world of Windows, the world of Unix, the world of anyway, in the world of storage, there are illegal characters in file names. So for instance, forward slashes, question marks, all these little characters that you see in here, these are all considered to be illegal characters. And so what Lightroom does is if it encounters one of these characters, it changes it, and it changes this stuff. This is how you tell it how to actually deal with that stuff. So it's saying here, do you treat this dot as a keyword separator? And we actually could say that yes to that. To treat a slash as a keyword separator, yes, we could all doing that. This is all in reading the metadata. But then treat these following characters down here as illegal. You want to go ahead and leave it as the complete set. Replace underscores. You would do it. You want to replace illegal characters with underscores. So if a student has actually put a question mark in the name of her file or their file, when they actually open it up into Lightroom, it will get changed to an underscore so that the file name is considered legal. And then the same thing is happening down here. How do you treat a space? So on down to the next preferences. So in the next preferences, we want to go to interface. At the interface down here, we've got panels. Click on interface. So some of this is actually set up for my personal preference because I can't believe that Adobe's able to actually get their type to be any smaller than it already is. So for me, the way I actually like to do this is that I don't want to put end marks on mine. I do set my font size to large so that I can actually see it. In this part right here, I do leave my screen color as black. One of the problems that people run into if they actually have a different color, because you can lighten up. So basically what we're talking about is the surround of Adobe, what the interface around your photograph would actually look like. So to show you what I mean by that, it's this. What does this stuff around here look like relative to your image? You can make this stuff extremely light. You can actually make this stuff white. The problem is that if you make it white, more often than not, it's lighter than the lightest part of your image, and it will cause your eyes to make errors in not only judgment, but in color both. So you really want the lightest part of your image the lightest part of your screen of what you're looking at here to actually be your image and not your screen itself. You'll have a better way of judging exposure and color both in that. Let me get back to this really quick. And then the dim level right here. If you use screen dimming on this, this will actually drop it to 80%. You can actually change the level of which that part happens. In the fill color over in here, again, I'm going to leave these at their default. It's a medium gray for your main window and your secondary window both. Again, I'm going to separate keywords here using commas. If you prefer to use a different method, go ahead. But when you're adding keywords to a file, so let's say you bring in a file of the picture that I've got right here. If I was going to bring in this file right here, I would use the keyword classroom, I would use the keyword student, the keyword glasses, the keyword purse, the keyword table, the keyword exit sign, the keyword door, the keyword fluorescent light. All of those keywords that I used in my keyword set, you separate them by commas, and then that part will be understood. Lightroom will be able to search based on each one of those individual criteria. However, if you prefer to use a different method, you can actually change this using this drop-down menu. The one thing I would caution you about doing that is that it seems like every system in the world, regardless of whose software, uses commas to separate keywords, so I would actually keep that part as commas. Autocomplete text in the keyword tag file, what this just means is that as you start to enter tags or keywords, if you've already entered that keyword previously, it actually completes the keyword part for you. So we all know that same sort of experience on our phone. Show badges, I don't really use badges, but you can go ahead and say show badges in here for people who are actually into that part. Ratings, it's just a way of rating stuff. Ratings and picks, you do want to actually show that part. Show stack counts. What this will actually do is there's a way that you can actually stack multiple images in in your Lightroom catalog so that it gives you more room to see, so that you're not it condenses a group of images into what they call a stack so that you can navigate faster. other places. This will actually show you the count. So if you've got 10 images in a stack, it'll read 10. If you've got 5, it'll actually read 5. So that's what's going on there. Show photos in the Navigator on mouse over. Again, this is something that I personally don't use a lot, but you can. And then show photo in tooltips. Personally, I like that part. So this is just explaining to people what those different tools are actually doing. And then tweaks down here, zoom click pointer into the center. Again, all of this is simply how the interface actually is managed. Most people will leave this all at its default, myself included. Use typographical fractions. This will actually, if you put in 1/4, it'll actually change it to the little smaller lowercase 1/4 part instead of leaving it out as the big full part. If you continue on down to the, while you're still there, hang on, let me go back to this part right here. If we go to, sorry, I went back one screen too many, or 2 screens too many. All right, at this point, it's saying go to catalog settings, and do you see that? Is that your next one over there? No, performance is your next one over, right?
Yes.
Okay, then you can exit out of preferences right now. We will come back to it, and I'm going to go to Lightroom to show you where to go next. So we were in preferences right here. We've set up blah, 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 blah. We've done all that part here. I'm going to then click out of this, and then I'm going to come back up to Lightroom and come down to catalog settings. We need to do some work in here first. So in catalog settings with the general tab selected, again, go back into our list that we've actually got going right here, and we'll go through these guys. So in this catalog, okay, so and this is where I was describing this earlier. In this general settings right here, this should show you the location of where your catalog is, and this is a great way as you're going through this whole process to make sure that your students have indeed put their catalog on their external hard drive in whatever place their OneDrive local is stored. Again, we want all of Lightroom, all of its catalogs, its exports, and its raw files to be held within that OneDrive local folder so that it is automatically backed up. This will be a place to show you exactly where that happens. The rest of this, there's nothing to actually set in here. However, this part matters hugely right here, and it's this backup part right here. And I'm going to say you should actually leave backup to never. And the reason I say this is that this is problematic because this, if you change this, it leads students to believe that they are backing up their raw files, and they are not backing up their raw files. The only thing that this is backing up right here is the catalog itself, is this small catalog database. So if we take a look out in my, I'm going to show you my Lightroom catalog right here. So in my Lightroom catalog, I have got my trip to Africa that's in here that's got 5,050 megabytes of photographs in it, whatever. It's huge. It's monstrous. However, the catalog that actually shows it is this little guy right here. This is the only thing. Well, it's this group right here. But if you take a look at the size of this guy right here, you can see that this is 28 megabytes. This entire catalog is 28 megabytes because it doesn't have a single raw file in it. All the raw files are sitting up here in camera files. What gets backed up is this 28 megabyte folder. That's all that you're backing up. And so the reason I say never do this is that it gives a false belief that they're actually backing this stuff up. Now the fact that we are backing up automatically to OneDrive, the backup responsibility has been offloaded to that process. So there would be no reason to worry about backing up your catalog anyway, because a copy of it is sitting up in the cloud in your Lightroom OneDrive. Make sense? All right. We can continue to go down to the next part right down now. I'm just going to go down to file handling right now. This part actually becomes a little bit more important in terms of how we actually have this set up. You used to have to actually go in and set your standard preview size. What happens now is that it actually looks at the computer that you're on and it adjusts this automatically for you. So I'm going to go ahead and suggest that you leave this on auto. And what auto means is that if you are working strictly on a laptop at a lower resolution, it will generate one size preview for you. preview. If you're working on a giant 31-inch desktop, it will actually generate a much larger preview for you, and that's part we care about. In terms of the preview quality, all previews are JPEG, so this is actually just be the compression part of it. Medium is a safe place to stay on this. And then automatically discard one-to-one previews after 30 days. This is just management. What happens is that when you bring in an image, the minute you import an image, it generates previews for you. Those previews are actually one-to-one to allow you students to actually see a really full-res version of what they're working on. However, in most cases, most students, after they've worked on a file for a week or two, whatever, they move on. They're shooting other stuff. So what this one-to-one, discard one-to-one says is that after 30 days, go ahead and let's do a little space management. Let's go ahead and discard those one-to-ones. You can always rebuild the one-to-ones. You can go back to a file you imported 15 years ago and generate another one-to-one preview if you need to work on that part. So you can do this. This is strictly about space management. The import and sequence number down here, again, I don't. It's set to be import as a number 1, and again, we're going to start at the value of 0, and then we're going to do it in 1 increment. So that's basically the only thing that's going on here. There's little reason to change any of that. The next thing down for metadata. So here in metadata, if you click on that, offer suggestions for recently entered values. Again, what's going to happen is that every time you start to enter, let's say I use the word classroom, that I'd assigned that as a keyword before, and I start to type in class, it will auto fill in the class. It'll actually add the whole room part to it. Include development settings in metadata inside JPEGs, TIFFs, PNGs, and PSD files. You do want to enable this part. One of the issues that we're having here a lot is that people have spent ages working with the develop module, and then somehow their file gets, their database gets corrupted, they lose their Lightroom catalog, they've still got their raw files, but they don't have any of this metadata. The way stuff is none of it has been embedded into these files, so they've lost things like, well, in this case, we're talking specifically about developing settings, so it would be recoverable if your Lightroom catalog was completely lost, but you had this string of JPEGs or PSD files, whatever, you would be able to recover that. Automatically write changes into XMP. This is a biggie. And the reason this was important is that by default this is turned off. It's probably turned off on your computer, isn't it? Yeah, that's a problem. And the problem is this. All the work that people do in Lightroom, all those changes that are made are all stored in the Lightroom database. And if that database is corrupted or lost or unsalvageable, all the development work that they've done is gone. It's just gone. They've lost it. If you add this automatically write changes in XMP files, what will happen is, I'll show you what my camera files actually look like. So you can see there's a list of CR2 files right here. In this case, it is not turned on for this grouping right here. If it was, or I haven't developed any of these files here, that's probably more than likely the case. If I had done any changes with any of these files before, it will write the sidecar file for that raw file that's got all the development settings, any of the changes that I've made, the keywording, all of that will be written in a text file that sits right next to this raw data file. And if you have that and your database is corrupted or lost, but you've got all that XMP data with your raw files, when you go to import all of these raw files into your brand new catalog, it will import all that data information with you and you will have it back in your Lightroom catalog. Make sense? So there's a big debate online about whether this should be on or off, but again, hard drives have gotten to the point that it's so cheap, storage is so cheap, it's just a good safety thing to actually have happen. So, okay, that part, should get through that part, metadata, so we're getting through this part. I strongly suggest you guys actually leave that part checked. It's a good safety part here. Look up city addresses and GPS coordinates. If you've got students who are actually tagging their stuff with GPS, this is probably not a bad thing to have. You can actually export suggestions with this. One of the things that I would caution everybody about, though, with this whole thing right here, and this also goes to in what you actually include in your copyright information, I think it's highly problematic that people put their addresses in their copyright information, because that stuff gets tagged into every file that they do. So if they print or if they export a JPEG and put it up online, All anybody needs to do is download that JPEG from online and go in, and they can get their address, their phone number, they can get all of that information. I think that's highly creepy. And so, again, I strongly discourage people to, you want to put in your contact information, so an email address, you certainly want to put in your name, your copyright information, that kind of stuff, but I would avoid being, I get really nervous about this address stuff right here, just so that you know. Face detection, if you're really into that kind of stuff, it simply tries to detect faces so that you can do a search by them. And then write date and time changes into proprietary raw files. Again, I don't really care about any of this part in here, so I can just leave that set the way it is. You can close up catalog settings right now. They've done their stuff. We're getting there, guys. Promise. I'm going to try to get through the next, just the last of these preferences, and let's see, yeah, just a few more of these things, and then we'll take a quick 10-minute break, and then we'll wind it all up. So the hard drive, this has to do with naming conventions here, and this is something that we are strongly suggesting people actually try to abide by. It avoids conflicts and problems right here. So this is strictly a list. It's a grid of naming conventions. So the hard drive that you're actually going to keep your OneDrive on, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it Billy, you can call it Mary Sue, you can call it My Little Honey, or whatever people call this. People name their hard drives after movies. Deliverance, that's what I'm going to call mine. Yeah, why not? Or 5 Easy Pieces. Yeah, if life were only so simple. Then again, we are strongly suggesting that your hierarchy, the structure of this, be named exactly the way this is named before. So again, you can see subfolders are being called camera files. So because some people will come in, instead of calling this camera files, they'll call it raw files. Instead of calling this catalog, they'll call it library, and it just gets too confusing. Lightroom catalog should again have your initials again with catalog after it. The assignment, again, this comes up a lot of time. Last name _ 2-digit. We have fought long and hard to actually get this part to happen. The way things used to be named in Photo Practice 1 and 2. Is this class done? Practice 1 or 2? Yeah. Yep. So normally when you guys did that, were files just named with an assignment number and then their last name?
Yeah.
Which becomes really problematic because then you have no alphabetical order. You've just got 15 assignment ones, and then it's totally ridiculous, right? So we've begged them to change that. They've agreed to actually do that. So now it begins with last name. We do have a 2-digit class code, so you can actually see in this case P1 would stand for Photo Practice 1, well, Photo 1. The assignment number, and again, we're trying to keep this to a dull roar, the number of things right here. So the assignment number and then the week that it's actually due. I fought against this one, but this was the way, this was sort of the prevailing winds.
Confusing, especially if you decide to give them an extra week on an assignment,
right?
Skip something, all of a sudden it's like,
yeah, I know. So at any rate, individual file naming, we're suggesting they go with this. It's just an extension of this file naming up here, except it's got another underscore with a file number in it. So again, frame number, not file number, frame number. So this is frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4. You guys get where that's all going. And then exporting. When you export, again, the catalogs you export should keep this same naming convention simply with an export set at the end. So as we continue on down. So importing your images, this would be a great time to take a break. So I got 25 after, if we can be back in, you guys, we're going to fast track this one. Can we do a 10-minute break? Is everybody good on that? All right. Yeah.
This Lightroom, same issue as that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It doesn't like you.
No, honestly, I had this problem so much during my shifts, and I had no idea how to fix it.
Okay, so no wait, so.
It would just do that.
Okay, we need to get IT to look at all of these then, because if it's happening on this one and that one, there's a good chance it's happening on other ones as
Should I
well.
move to another one?
Yeah, try another one. You might as well. We can troubleshoot now.